Hey guys, Andrew here. Welcome to the NaNoWriMo tips. It is National Novel Writing Month 2016, day 24. Today is the character roll call. I'm gonna break this down into like three portions, okay? The bottom line is I suppose the question that's being asked is, where are your characters? The reason why I ask this is because I have written novels before, first drafts. I completed them within 30 days. And then months later, whenever I went to edit those books, I'm reading through it and then I find like a new character that literally comes out of nowhere. They literally just walk into a room and have like a huge effect on the story. When I wrote it in the first draft stage, you're just like going through the story and like knocking it out, and you will come to a point where you think to yourself, oh, I need like a new character here. I'll just insert one in right now, and this is at the 40% mark. This was in particular my NaNoWriMo project last year, where I had a bunch of it's set in like the 1850s, and there was a bunch of soldiers in like a forest, and at the time I had like 6 soldiers, and they all had their different characters and different like strengths and attributes. But I realized that I needed like a 7th one, so I just inserted him in at like the halfway point. His name was Henderson. And when I went to edit that story, I was just like reading through the whole story. It was months later, so I'd basically forgotten what had happened. And I get to the halfway point, and next thing you know, there's this guy called Henderson. He's like standing there with binoculars, and he's like part of the crew already. And I was like, oh geez, I didn't even introduce this guy at the start. So it is day 24. We are nearing the end of National Novel Writing Month, and today I want you to consider where are your characters, and you're going to do a character roll call. Like I say, this comes in 3 portions. Number 1, have all your characters been introduced? Number 2, how have they ended their story arc? Number 3, and this is the most important, has that character done what you need them to do? So with point number 1, have they been introduced? Go through all your characters and just double check that you have introduced them earlier on in the novel, and they really do need to be introduced within the first 25% of your book. As long as they've been introduced somehow, just introduce your main characters in the first quarter of your book and just make sure they're there. Don't do a Henderson and have them turn up at the halfway point, okay? Step number 2, how have they ended? Does your character die? Or does he get to a point where he can now jump off that cliff, so to speak? Just figure out that you have written in how that character ends in whatever fashion you need it to. Just make sure that they do come to that end, so that later on when you do the editing stage, you don't have this character who's about to walk into a door and then for the rest of the story you don't know what happens. Have them going through that door and come to that ending that you have planned for them. Make sure your character has an end and that you've written it in. And finally, step number 3, have you got that character to do what you need them to do? This isn't what you want them to do or what you think they should do. Rather, are they doing what you need them to do? Characters are vessels that carry the story forward. Some folk will say that, plot drives a story, but you can't really have a plot unless you have a bunch of characters in conflict. So your characters bring that conflict and they help move that plot forward. And so the way I work this is that I will have each character I have in my stories has to do something that creates conflict. Otherwise, what are they doing there? Now if it's a side character who's just walking into a store buying a pair of shoes and overhears a conversation or whatever, yourself, you have those wee small characters that you could take out if you needed. They're not really important to the story. They'll have a purpose, but they're not specifically important. Whereas your main characters, they need to be doing things. So for me, for my stories, at a minimum, I need my characters to be doing 5 things. And have a wee checklist, and I'm are they doing each of those 5 things in each of those chapters? So, I would go through, for the character roll call, I'll double check that this character has done items A, B, C, D, and D, and if C is missing, Well, that's no big deal. I'll just fill it in. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes, like you know yourself, I do write my story backwards sometimes. So it is really important that I double check that all those like plot points or what I need that character to do, I need to double check that he has actually done that. So take your character roll call. Make sure that your characters have been introduced, that they've come to their end, their story arc, and then like make sure that they all do what you need them to do. Alright? If you don't do this and you don't take that character roll call, when you edit your book in like 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, you'll come across the character and you will then tackle that character and you'll think to yourself, okay, well I haven't introduced them, or they didn't do that third plot point thing, they didn't do what I needed them to do, I'll just write it in now. When you tackle your character later on and you start filling in those gaps later, because you're not in the zone the way you are now, you will end up like treating that character differently in the future than were you just to do it now when your brain is already in the zone inside your story. So I really do heavily recommend that you take a character roll call now during your first draft and just get it done. Chat to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching. You can hit subscribe below and stay tuned for more NaNoWriMo tips. And if you have any creative writing headaches, just leave your comments in the comments box below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.